Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack, and in this video you're checking out an updated Magicka Sorcerer build for the Elder Scrolls Online. Of course, Mag Sorc is an extremely powerful and easy to play build both for soloing and group DPS. We have great damage and amazing survivability and self-healing. Combine that with this setup, which is almost 90% focused on heavy attack damage, and you've got an extremely easy and strong setup. As usual, we'll be going over the stats, the gear sets, skills, champion points, and everything else to make the build work. And all of that is coming up next. All right, everybody, here we are back on the Magicka Sorcerer for the Elder Scrolls Online with a bit of a build update, an extremely easy update for the Magicka Sorcerer here. Tons of damage, both for solo play and group play, and PVE, whatever you want to do. So let's go ahead and jump into the stats first. Talk about how the build works. Stat sheet looking at about 35,000 max magicka, 19,000 max health, 13,000 stamina. Recoveries are not that good. We honestly don't need recovery because it's going to be primarily a heavy attack build, which you'll see in a few minutes. We actually have more stamina recovery than magicka recovery. Yep, so that's interesting. In terms of your spell damage, got about 3,000 there self-buffed. Of course, with our back bar glyph, we'll be over 3,500 spell damage, about 55% spell critical, and then your resistances do go up with your armor buff, which should be up most of the time, especially if you are solo, about 18,000 spell resist, 16,000 physical resist. Of course, we've got 64 points into max magicka, being the mag sorc that we are. You can run purple tri-stat food. You can also run the gold tri-stat food, the Bewitched Sugar Skulls, for a little bit extra health recovery. That'll be a nice option too. Now, we do actually need the extra stamina. You might be wondering about that. Why so much stamina on a Magicka Sorcerer? Just wait, you'll see when we talk about the gear sets and the skills. Running the Shadow Mundus here for the extra crit damage. We've got passive minor berserk, passive minor protection. We'll talk about all of those buffs in a minute. In terms of the potion, if you want to solo world bosses and things like that, I would recommend a tri-stat potion just for the extra health and stamina. That's going to be really good for helping you sustain. Otherwise, if you're in just like a group setup, basic magicka potions is totally fine. That's because we get our spell power buff and our spell critical buff for free on the Mag Sorc. In terms of race, I usually go with High Elf, especially on a heavy attack sorcerer build, which this is. That's because High Elves get the extra damage reduction while channeling. So that's going to work while you are weaving in your Lightning Staff heavy attack. You get 5% less damage. You also get the spell recharge passive, either magicka or stamina bonus, whichever is lowest. So that's a nice bit of sustain on your build too. Of course, you get the max magicka and the extra spell damage. Now, other races will be okay. I probably would prefer Dark Elf. If you run Dark Elf, you could maybe run Blue Food, max health and max magicka, because you'll have extra stamina from the Dark Elf passive. Breton, really, you don't need the extra sustain on this type of build because it's all about heavy attacks. Heavy attacks do damage and restore resources at the same time. So I would not recommend Breton if you want this specific build, though it can be good for other Mag Sorc builds. And then finally, Khajiit will be actually a nice choice too for the extra crit damage. So I think that covers the basics. Let's jump into the item sets next. So for our first 5-piece set, we've got the Undaunted Unweaver set. This is a dungeon set from the base game. This comes from the Blackheart Haven dungeon, and it is a light armor set here. So what it does is it gives us some pretty nice stats. We have max magicka spell critical, pretty good. And then the 5-piece bonus here is actually pretty interesting for a heavy attack build. When you use an ability that costs stamina, you increase the damage of your light and heavy attacks by 1685 for 10 seconds. So we're just talking about the extra stam pool on this build. It's to proc this 5-piece bonus. Basically, any stamina ability that we cast, it's going to give us that extra bonus heavy attack damage And this actually stacks up on each hit of the heavy attack, not just the final hit. So what skill am I using to proc that bonus? Well, on the back bar, I just am going to use Barbed Trap. A pretty cheap stamina cost. It gives me a decent dot. And it actually gives me a buff I can use, Minor Force, giving me 10% bonus crit damage. So if you are going to run this setup like me, you will need a stamina skill. So Barbed Trap is going to be a nice way to proc that 5-piece bonus. So like I said, this is from a dungeon. So you will need to farm this gear set. And I just basically picked 5 body pieces. I think that's probably going to be the easiest for this particular dungeon. So running this on the feet, legs, hands, waist, and chest. All divines if you can. And I believe I have maybe 2 max health enchants. We'll go over that at the end. Now, in terms of the second set, I am going full on damage for this build, you guys. And so we're running another heavy attack set. Let's talk about Noble Duelist. You probably, I'm guessing you never heard of this set ever. That's because it didn't used to be that good, honestly. This is actually getting buffed in the Stonethorn DLC, and it's a pretty nice buff. You can see we get an interesting 2-piece bonus here, Stamina Recovery. Then we have 2 spell damage bonuses. And for the 5-piece, when you deal damage with a light or heavy attack in melee range, you cause your light and heavy attacks to deal 1811 damage. That's bonus damage for 5 seconds. And that can occur every 5 seconds. So this set, very similar to the Undaunted Unweaver set, almost exactly the same, just a different proc mechanic and slightly more damage. This set is even easier to proc. All you have to do is be in melee range. Now, I know melee range on the Sorcerer may not be ideal for some situations, but remember, we are a Mag Sorc, which means we have insane survivability. We've got great self-healing, so I don't find it to be an issue to be in melee range. Even if I'm solo, I'm going to be in melee range anyways because I'm face tanking a boss. So the proc is very easy to work with. This set comes from the Blessed Crucible dungeon, and you can really run any pieces you want. I think it's going to depend on what drops you get. It is going to be important, though, to pick up the staff because we do want to proc that bonus on our front bar and only the front bar. If you proc it on the back bar, it's not really going to make sense with the rotation that we have set up for a heavy attack build. So the most important piece of gear on this, if you want to run it exactly this way, is going to be the Noble Duelist Lightning Staff. And then you can just get 3 other pieces because remember, staff counts for 2. The way I have this set up currently is just 3 pieces of jewelry. If you have the trait change gems, definitely consider Bloodthirsty on at least 2 of these pieces because that's going to give you even more damage and execute range. That does apply to your heavy attack as well. And then 3 spell damage enchants, so basically spell damage everywhere. Remember, heavy attacks restore resources. We're honestly not even using that many skills on this easy setup. So going full on damage is no problem. For the monster set, finally, I think you have some different options here. If you want just a good overall option for solo and group, I recommend Slimecraw. This gives you extra spell critical, which is great on Sorcerer, and then also the passive Minor Berserk, so 8% bonus damage. I like this especially for soloing for that extra damage. Sometimes in group situations, you can get that buff, so you might want to pick up maybe a pure damage, like a proc set, like Zon, for example. Zon will be pretty strong for DPS on this build because remember, you will be in melee range. So that is the setup: 2 Slimecraw, 5 Undaunted Unweaver. Then we have Noble Duelist on the front bar and jewelry. In terms of the back bar staff, you really do want a Maelstrom Arena Lightning Staff. Remember, you can now get this on normal Maelstrom Arena. You don't even have to do Veteran anymore to get this item. And why would you want this? Basically, the Crushing Wall bonus is one of the best bonuses for heavy attack builds in the game. You can see here on my back bar, my heavy attacks deal an additional 1353 damage to enemies in my Wall of Elements. So that's a 3rd stackable heavy attack bonus that we're applying on this build. So basically 3 ways, 4 if you count Slimecraw, of increasing your heavy attacks, and that's not even counting like champion points, for example, which we'll talk about in a minute. So super strong heavy attack setup on this build. In terms of the traits and everything, main hand, I would recommend Precise this patch. Notice that Precise in the Stonethorn DLC is actually stronger. They did buff that slightly to 8.6% spell critical. It's going to be really nice on the Sorcerer build. We do want the Shock enchant. That's just going to make it easier to proc off balance. Yeah, I'm talking about 40 to 50k damage ticks on a single heavy attack on an off balance enemy. Pretty crazy stuff. On the back bar, like I said, Maelstrom Staff, Lightning Staff. You do want it infused if you can with the spell damage enchant. In terms of the weights and traits on the body, like we said, Divine's everything if you can get it. That's going to give you the most damage. Now, in terms of overall stats, because Undaunted and Weaver, this is a light set. You've got 5 light. Definitely recommend a heavy helmet and a medium shoulder if you can. And if you have the Undaunted passive, that's going to give you 6% extra max health, stamina, and magicka. That's the ideal way to run a monster set for this build. And then in terms of the enchants, you can go full on max magicka if you want. Because I'm soloing currently, I actually have 2 max health enchants. Just to get my health pool a little bit higher for soloing. So I believe that covers all the gear. Let's go ahead and talk about the skills next. Starting on our front bar, Lightning Staff, we have basically some passive abilities here. First is going to be Inner Light from the Mages Guild. This is the first ability there. It gives us a good max magicka bonus, and then our Major Prophecy buff passively, so that's 10% extra spell critical. Like I said, this is why we can run the basic magicka potions or tri-stat potions and be totally fine on this build. Then we got another passive buff here called Bound Aegis. This is, I believe, from Daedric Summoning. Yep, last ability there. And this is the Magicka Morph. It does give you even more max magicka, 8%. Plus Minor Resolve, which gives you a little bit of extra physical and spell resistance. You also get some nice passives from having this slotted. Next up, our main defensive skill is going to be Hardened Ward. That's also from Daedric Summoning. So we get about the 11k damage shield here for 6 seconds. If you're running in a group, this might not be necessary, but it's good for emergencies. If you're soloing, you'll definitely want to throw this into your rotation every once in a while just to absorb damage. It's really strong still. Next up is going to be Crystal Fragments. So kind of a flex spot here. I do like Crystal Fragments though from the Dark Magic skill line. Gives you nice passives plus an extra damaging ability on your front bar. Now since we are mostly about heavy attacks in terms of our damage rotation on the setup, you won't get tons of Crystal Frag procs on this build. That's why I said this is flexible. You could substitute this with something else like Daedric Mines, for example, something from the Mages Guild, whatever you want here, really. And then last up, we got Elemental Drain. This is more for the solo setup. This is from the Destruction Staff skill line. And really why you want this is for the extra Major Breach. So that's reducing your enemy's armor by 50 to 80. It also gives you Minor Magicka Seal, so some extra free Magicka Sustain. Doesn't cost anything to cast this ability, so it's just really nice. Especially if you are solo. And then finally here on the front bar, again for a solo setup, Temporal Guard is going to be ideal. That's from the Psijic Order skill line right here. This gives us that passive minor protection, so 8% damage reduction at all times on the front bar. And then we actually get a free damage shield while blocking due to the Psijic Order passives. So this can be really nice. Remember, you can combine this with your Hardened Ward to get a very strong damage shield. Great for soloing bosses on this setup. Let's go ahead and swap to the back bar, which is going to be all about our dots. So starting off with Unstable Wall. This is from the Destruction Staff again. Second ability here. So this does decent shock damage, AoE. It's also going to help you proc off balance on your enemies. The main reason why we use this though all the time is to proc that spell damage enchant. Remember on our back bar, Infused Staff. That's going to be over 500 spell damage every 5 seconds, basically for free as long as you keep this dot effect on the ground. So really make sure you're keeping that up as much as possible. And then we do combine that with a similar skill here, Lightning Flood. Though this is from the Sorcerer class. This is actually from Storm Calling. Third ability there, it does similar damage, similar type of AoE effect, so more lightning damage on the ground is always good. Also gives you a nice synergy if you are playing in a group. Next up, of course, we've got Barb Trap. And if you missed the beginning of the video, rewind because this is the most important skill on the build, I would say. Comes from the Fighters Guild. That's the last ability here. It does cost stamina. So again, that's why we want a decent stamina pool. It does physical damage, but it also gives us Minor Force, which we can make use of. So that's 10% bonus critical damage. And again, the reason why we're using this is to proc our sets for even more heavy attack damage. Last up, we got just our 2 buffs here. So Boundless Storm and Critical Surge. These are both from Storm Calling. So Boundless Storm is the second ability here. This is our armor buff, as well as some AoE damage. Very nice. And then Critical Surge, this is our major sorcery, so 20% spell damage. And this is also our passive healing. So every 1 second, as long as we're doing critical damage, we get over 3,000 health back every second. Very nice, very easy to maintain your health on the Mag Sorc. And finally, the ultimate here, you do have some options. I do like the Greater Storm Atronach for like boss fights because it is such a long ultimate. Probably one of the longest ultimates in the game, I think. 28 seconds of dumping your Atronach on the ground. Does very nice single target and some AoE damage too. So that is nice. So you can do Elemental Rage here also. If you need more burst damage for something like Maelstrom Arena, then I would recommend Thunderous Rage because that's going to be much faster. All right, so that is the setup, front bar and back bar. Now let's talk about the rotation. How would you make this work basically? Let's say you're solo. So you just want to make sure you buff up. Got a world boss here in Cold Harbor. So your buffs are very simple on this build. Boundless Storm, Critical Surge, that's basically it. Then bar swap here. On the front bar, you want to cast Elemental Drain to get that debuff. And you can cast your shield if you want. Once the fight starts, drop your dots, including your trap, bar swap, and then heavy attack. Look, I procced off balance already, and they are just melting away. Fight is basically over. This is a world boss, you guys, and the fight is over basically before it started. I'm not even going to bar swap back. That's all. Done. All right, what else? Let's talk about passives. What passives do you need to make this work? Sorcerer passives overall are very strong. In the Dark Magic skill line, for example, you will want Unholy Knowledge for the cost reduction. Blood Magic can give you a little bit extra healing if you happen to proc your Crystal Frags. Persistence is actually good. After you block an attack, you get some cost reduction as well. And then Exploitation, I forgot to mention this in the stats, we do get some extra spell critical when you activate Crystal Frags. Now in terms of Daedric Summoning, these are mostly pet focused, but some of these are actually very strong. So Rebate, we won't really make use of since this is a non-pet build. The ultimate doesn't really count as a pet towards this passive, so you could drop 2 points there. But definitely put 2 points into Power Stone, one of the best passives in the game, you guys. 15% cost reduction for your ultimates, super strong. Daedric Protection as well gives you the extra stamina recovery, which is great on this build since we're using stamina. And again, Expert Summoner, we're not going to get this one either. No pets specifically on this build, so you can save 2 points there. Storm Calling, most of these are good though. You got the 10% Magicka recovery. Energize gives you more shock damage. Amplitude gives you more damage at max health enemies. And then Expert Mage, actually very nice, especially for the front bar setup. 6% extra spell damage is not bad. This increases based on how many sorcerer abilities you have slotted and active on each bar. Let's talk about weapon passives. Of course, we are just double Destruction Staff, so this is what we want to focus on. Now, a very important passive, I want to make sure you're not missing this one. Try Focus for a Shock Staff, which is what we're using. Heavy attacks damage nearby enemies for 100% of the damage done. That's why on that world boss just a second ago, all I did was heavy attack the main boss, and I killed the other 2 bosses basically at the same time. So make sure you put your points into Try Focus. Obviously, all these are good, really, but Try Focus, you need to get that one first. Armor passives, you do want all of your light armor passives since we are using 5 pieces of light armor. Very important. Fighters Guild. This is not bad, actually. If you check out Intimidating Presence, this reduces your stamina cost of Fighters Guild abilities. Since we are running Barb Trap on the back bar, I would recommend you get this passive. Slayer you don't really need, though Banish the Wicked can be nice for the ultimate, depending on what you're fighting. Even Skilled Tracker, that's probably worth a point. Mage's Guild, definitely. You'll get some extra max magicka on your front bar. If you are using the Temporal Guard ultimate, you will want to put 2 points into Concentrated Barrier. Again, that's that passive damage shield proc. This gives us a 6,000 damage shield for free every time we block with that ultimate slotted. So really nice passive there. Of course, if you have Undaunted unlocked, go ahead and pick up these two, Undaunted Command, Undaunted Metal. PvP, not needed on this build. Of course, racial skills, you want those. And Alchemy Medicinal Use for the extra potion duration. Check out those champion points next. Again, this is going to be for the solo build. You might want to adjust this slightly if you want to run more of a group focus build. But in the green tree, 28 into Warlord, 11 into Sprinter, 43 Tenacity, 64 Arcanist, 43 Mooncalf, 19 into Healthy, 31 into Shadow Ward and Tumbling. In the blue tree, we got 51 into Elfborn, 43 Elemental Expert, 38 Spell Erosion, 63 into Staff Expert. Now, you wouldn't do this on any other build except a heavy attack build, so keep that in mind. It's giving me 30% bonus damage on those Lightning Staff heavy attacks. Very strong. Thaumaturge, 72. This buffs heavy attacks as well, you guys, since they are considered damage over time. And then 3 into Piercing. That's just for a little extra damage on Barbed Trap. Remember, we do want 75 total in this tree specifically. That's going to unlock the Exploiter passive, which gives us 10% bonus damage, even more damage against off-balance targets. In the red tree, 81 into Ironclad, 49 into Hardy Elemental Defender, 34 Thick-Skinned, 1 Light Armor Focus, and then 56 into Bastion. Again, that's going to affect our damage shields. Finally, the outfit style, if you're interested in that, this is actually just a costume. So from the Dark Brotherhood DLC, this is the Black Hand robe, and I'm just hiding the helmet. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap up this Magicka Sorcerer build update for the Elder Scrolls Online. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Of course, if you did, don't forget to crush that like button. Definitely helps out the channel, so I'd really appreciate it. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more build videos just like this one. Make sure you turn those notifications on so you don't miss anything. I'm in the process of updating a lot of my older builds, like this one, now for the Stonethorn DLC, just because so many item sets and skills and things have changed. So expect a lot more updates. Now, if you'd like to support the channel further, make sure you check out my social media as well as the new website. Links will be down in the description below. Speaking of the website, there will be a written guide for this build as soon as the video goes up, so go ahead and check that out later too if you need to refer back to anything. As always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.